Welcome back, friend. I invite you to sit back with me. Relax. Take a deep breath. Let the sound of the crackling fire seep into your ears. Feel the warm fuzzy bliss tickle your heart. It's time for another story. Let's begin. About 2 months ago I obtained 2 grams of DMT. I was elated, after several years of searching for it. I had really wanted it in the first place but had settled for various other diethyltryptamines over the past 3 years, which had brought me a wealth of interesting and amazing experiences. I tried a couple of moderately successful YAG journeys which had shown me the potentials of the mind spaces available through DMT. But I have been perhaps a little cowardly about inflicting the physical effects of YAG on myself again, though I long to visit the mental territory again. The package arrived one sunny April morning when I had a day off. I loaded a joint with a small dose of the white freebase powder and sparked it. An immediate warm buzzing around my neck and shoulders followed the bite of the harsh smoke on my lungs, and my vision gently morphed with fine horizontal seams like a Venetian blind, each band tinting reality either red, green or blue in alternating order. Intuitively I felt a sense of potential power and significance, although as the experience quickly dissipated I was strongly aware of the taste of plastic and protests of my long-suffering lungs. 5 minutes or so afterwards an old friend from whom I had not heard for years phoned out of the blue to say they were moving abroad. I had heard talk about synchronicities on chat boards etc. before, but I tend to the skeptic side on such matters. In my thoughts about why I have an interest in the matter of psychedelics, I take the view that you have to separate clearly in your mind the normal workaday life of a 21st century Westerner, and the dream world that psychedelics can reveal. I don't believe in ghosts and UFOs etc. during normal life. I remain a little wary of those believers with a glint in their eye who abandon their lives completely to the pursuit of one conspiracy or another. But when I am under the influence of psychedelic drug, at a sufficient dose, the dream state I occupy appears to have certain rules and parameters which are different to those of the lucid state. Whether or not the word real can be used in reference to a state where these different parameters apply is a moot point. When I am in such a state I may as well interact with it, if only in the interest of knowledge or novelty. In the afternoon I bought a glass pipe with a little side hole and some vials from the local head shop. With this new equipment I determined to explore further. I put some dry tobacco in the body of the pipe along with some spice and held it over a candle to heat the pipe. I made several attempts like this with varying successes. I often complicated the lift-off by worrying about the safety of the candle flame. I found music distracting. A singer's voice would be morphed into a metallic jabbering. These first journeys were brief and hard to integrate. The rapidity of the visions was such that only the general tenor of the content was discernible. It seemed to have a sinister tone, consisting of images such as playing cards flashing by, skulls, military hardware, screws. At one point a vicious gun turret on the back of a plane with jutting machine barrels. Just a quick image frame amongst many. The almost instant passing of this phase was followed by a warm womb-like phase where I did not have any technical or realist visions, just the warm reds of the bright ceiling light through my closed eyelids, across which seem like waves folded and divided. I had experienced an almost identical state as this latter phase using 4-ACO-DMT and felt very comfortable. In this subjective state I often feel like I am in the presence of a benevolent God, to whom I feel it is only right to thank for all the good things in life, and to send out good wishes to all my loved ones. I then feel a little guilty and send out good wishes to all the people I don't love. Finally I feel very virtuous all round. When back in the sober state my skeptic brain has a good laugh at these religious epiphanies. This is what I like about psychedelics. They let me experiment with possibilities which in the real world are not possibilities. For example, the question what might it be like to burst a sack full of dimensions on your head, is a subject of metaphysical speculation. But under the influence, and you might be lucky enough to participate in some kind of encounter where this actually appears to take place. I often found myself swaying gently with my arms folded and a warm smile over my face. Almost bowing to the universe in satisfied bliss. I took one hit in the kitchen at the back of my house overlooking our back garden, which has many pleasant trees, some still in blossom. The good sunshine that evening gave the foliage a translucent light. In the kitchen I heated the pipe over the gas hob. The disadvantage of my method seemed to be that it led to quite some wastage. I needed to cover the side hole on the pipe to achieve a stronger negative pressure, which results in a more effective vaporization. However, the pipe was hot to touch, and so again I was approaching the jump with a cluttered mind state. I managed 2 tokes, holding the last in, but not convinced of its adequacy. I kept my eyes open, holding steady on the kitchen units while seated on a tall stool. The surge began and I watched the kitchen units dancing before my eyes, sliding along left to right in outline form, neon-colored reds, blues and greens. I looked at the cooker, whose control surface would duplicate along all the units, flickering back and forth. Then I looked at the microwave on the work surface, which was also indulging in these strange displays. Immediately I beheld the sudden exchange of pulses or spurts of neon energy between it and the gas cooker. At this point I had to laugh a little. I had a sense that this performance was for my benefit somehow. There had been some comedic element which had struck a chord in me and just seemed absolutely hilarious. I remember thinking that if my MRS had walked in, I would have pointed at what I was witnessing and said, "Would you look at that?" Quite unself-consciously, as though it was there to see plain as daylight. I began to surmise that my technique was probably flawed and wasteful. The pipe became quite grubby. I didn't want to wash away remnants of the previous burn, but I knew that the remnants would quickly degrade anyway exposed to air. I was getting toward the end of my spice as well, so I made further dispatches to Iraqis, to whom, the people of which culture I am eternally indebted. In the knowledge of almost certain replenishment, I decided to purchase a more effective pipe and make the best of what was left to me at that time. I found a light bulb style vaporizer which matched the prescription perfectly at a penny under a £5 from the head shop. Its ease of use has led me to imagine using it to try vaporizing some other tripped minds, all in solid form UNF, such as 4-ACO DMT and DPT. This vaporizer I tested in the kitchen over a hob. I was a little apprehensive because I had been chewing over the sinister tone some of the visions I had experienced. I wondered if that was the thin end of the wedge, and that by getting a really big chest full I was only going to submerge deeper into something sinister that I did not want to see. I could not reconcile this fear with the wonderful blissful sense of being I was experiencing in the afterglow. I wondered if it was some part of myself that I was genuinely scared to look at. The voice of logic reminded me that whatever happens is over almost as quickly as it begins, and that gave me a sense of strength going in. The heat melted the light yellow tinted crystals into a colorless pool which gathered in the bottom of the bulb. I watched white vapor uncoiling around the glass as the bulb became opaque. I drew slowly one long potent lungful, and as I did so the vapor billowed more furiously. My tongue and lips numbed and my respiratory plumbing stung a little as I filled up. Eyes opened, I placed the still billowing bulb down on a cold hob and turned the heat off. As I did this the room tinted yellow sepia, and I shut my eyes looking for a slideshow. I was immediately disappointed. Just the womb-like state with some extra patterning, but then the warm crescendo of buzzing, both audible and physical, spread through my neck and shoulders, followed by a very slight crack or snap from somewhere in my auditory canal. For a short while I was not strictly local. I don't remember events as such, just a sensation of being somewhere in between my kitchen and the dream world. Then this absence of self was burst by a small patch of vivid vision. Like the view through a tiny hole in the wall of a darkened room out onto the scene on a bright summer day. I thought I saw a snippet of rows of parked cars, like the US guzzlers of the 50s with their chromed wings, or maybe it was an orderly residential scene. I gasped involuntarily, startled by the many implications of this vision. The stylistic appearance of the scenes were partly culturally familiar, and at the same time slightly skewed. I was startled out of phase with the vision, but I was exhilarated and back in the afterglow, where I began giving praise to the universe for what I could only formulate as the privilege of what I had seen. The question of intentionality came up again in my mind. It felt like I had been shown these things by the big whatever. I gently swayed on the stool and basked in the beautiful concept that the universe was far more bizarre and comedic than I could ever have imagined. I had gasped at the ontological ramification that I might have seen another world or a parallel universe. I felt certain for a few moments inside that I had seen proof that worlds and culture not particularly unlike our own, or sharing certain evolutionary or environmental parameter existed, and there might even be many of them. This was not the kind of revelation that transposes well into conversation, so I kept my counsel to myself. My MRS does not approve of my little hobby very much, but for all the right reasons, because she cares about me, so I don't recite her my adventures. The general effect of all this DMT smoking has been strangely positive. I am conscious of the power of suggestion in potentially shaping the experiences we have. After all, I think it was Hume who surmised that we are the sum of our experiences. I felt almost virtuous not to have witnessed entities which could be described as self-transforming machine elves, though that is not to say I was in any position to doubt the subjective truth of these descriptions. But I had felt what seemed to me divine presence, and visualized abstract entities in the wide mind space of closed eyes with a strong light source. And I had witnessed something that had startled me to the core of me being in a deeply satisfying way, although I could not fathom its significance. It could have been many possible or impossible things and called to mind a reality along the lines of Michael Moorcock's multiverse. I also noticed a sense of well-being in general life, which I have heard reported, and subsequently may be a result of preconditioning. However, this sense seems so tangible and yet natural as to be too good to be true. I found a part of me thinking that everyone should have a blast with this stuff at least once. A cliché, I know. I also imagined the possibility of a worldwide pyramid selling scheme by which an alien race might prepare humanity for contact. This tickled me, since in my newfound openness to the parameters of altered space, such a conspiracy might be impossible to disprove. I felt heightened empathy with even the people I perhaps disliked, and tangible antidepressant effect. Not that I am generally depressive these days. But there is something to this. I would only complain that my chest has been taking a beating. There is a strange logic that it appears that the more effective a hit I achieve, the less troublesome my chest is. I cough up some chunks in the aftermath, and the taste doesn't offend me anymore. Welcome back, friend. I invite you to sit back with me. Relax. Take a deep breath. Let the sound of the crackling fire seep into your ears. Feel the warm fuzzy bliss tickle your heart. It's time for another story. Let's begin. My next consignment arrived a week after that final excursion. Excited